Welcome to Conversational Currency, powered by the Speakers Retreat. I'm your host, Shadeed Eleazer. Now, this is the Behind the Brand segment of Conversational Currency. Conversational Currency is the fastest growing platform that focuses on the value and importance of social skills for business in a digital era. Behind the Brand tells the stories behind the success of today's business and thought leaders. And the Speakers Retreat is your 3-day live event that takes you behind the scenes into the inner workings of a 6-figure public speaking business. The Speakers Retreat is hosted by Pure Potentials and Jackie McClinigan. Now today, ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest. Now, Keith, my audience loves to know the why behind the what. So take us into your story and tell us the story of how Keith Willis came to be in terms of where you are today.
Thank you, Shadeed. Really happy to be here. So it started, I guess, way over 20 years ago. I spent 6 years in the Army, and as I was contemplating getting out of the military, it was kind of now what's what. So I had an opportunity to work with a recruiter that recruited junior military officers. So I went through a very, very extensive program that really helped me get ready for corporate America. I went to a conference, and that conference took place over the course of 2 days. I probably had 15 interviews. And out of those interviews, I landed in the pharmaceutical industry. As a part of that, I really developed a skill around learning how to actually build a resume as well as learning how to interview. And so over time, as I've risen through the ranks of pharmaceuticals, I've been a hiring manager, I come across a lot of people that have, resumes that they need help with. They need coaching around a lot of different items, and they also need help with interview skills. So I've kind of landed in the space where I've been doing a lot of helping people with that. Along the way, also, I've had an opportunity to do a lot of coaching. In the pharmaceutical industry, we get a lot of training around coaching, management skills, leadership skills. One of the positions I had was around training people in management. And so I was exposed to the Strength Finders. And so Strength Finders basically is, think of it this way. When you do something that you do well and it makes you feel strong, that's kind of a strength. And then if you do something that you feel weak, that's usually a weakness. One of the things I joke about is that I clean floors really, really well. Some of that's from growing up with 2 brothers and getting in trouble my mother had us clean a lot of stuff. So when I clean the floor, my wife's really, really happy because she said, you do a really, really good job with that. And that's something that makes me feel strong. I do it really, really well, but that's not a strength. So that's a perfect example of that. And so one of the things that I learned as a sales manager is that when you focus on people's strengths, you can really, really get you can get better results. I had a representative, we had spent the day together, and at the end of the day, she said to me, I guess I'm going to go home and I'm going to cry. And she was being somewhat facetious. We had a very, very good relationship, but it really made me go home and think and say, maybe there's something I need to be doing a little bit differently. So I just read the book, Break All the Rules by Marcus Buckingham. And so I really began to kind of think about some of those concepts. So the next day when we worked together, I asked her, I said, what is it that you do really, really well? And so what she said is, I paint pictures. I help physicians really think about the patients that they need to write for. And so I said, that's what we're going to do. Well, that was what we did. And so she went from underperforming by the end of the year to really having a great year. So that was really a great lesson for me that I really needed to think about how I manage and I coach people and be a lot more effective in that. And so, up until that point, I had always been somebody that had been really, really tough as far as coaching, giving direct feedback, which I think is good. But I think there's also a way to communicate with people really more effectively. And so that really began to make a shift for me in how I basically coach and develop people. And so what I've become known for is somebody that does a really, really good job of that. So kind of a cross-section of that, the resume building, kind of the career building. I'm kind of in this space where I'm looking at myself as a career coach. I can really, really help people enhance their performance by really focusing on their strengths.
Excellent story. Many, many excellent details for our audience. Now, Keith, let's go back in the time machine and go in the way, way back machine and take us to young Keith. In that, I have a theory that in many cases, if you pay attention to the signs, the person that we evolve into, the seeds are already planted through our examples, through our influences, and our general peer group growing up. Take us back to your earliest influences, and what did you learn from them that helps you in your role as a career coach today?
I probably would say one of my biggest influences has been my father. So my father passed away. It's probably been 15 years ago, but was really a staple in the community. My father ran for the school board. My father was a writer. He had his own column called Strictly Rick. He was a scout leader. He did tons of things in the community. He was a Mason. So, my father was somebody that really attracted a lot of people to him. So I think growing up, really seeing that, really being somebody of service, my family was, highly involved in the church. And so all of those things I think really, really influenced me growing up. I remember when my father passed away, he died of pancreatic cancer. And I remember a young woman had come by the hospital that day, the day that he had passed. And she had talked with him a couple of weeks ago, and she was kind of struggling. She had just re-enrolled in school, and she was beginning to kind of, make a way for herself. So that had a huge impact on me. Even though my father was very, very sick, he was still helping people. I remember at his funeral, all the cars and things that were lined up, all the people that came to see him off. And so I think that, that really had a big, and at the time I was 38, so it wasn't like I was a kid that was making my way and I was still kind of doing some of these things. But I think there's two intersections with that. One is, my father passed away, he was 66, he was relatively young, had just started his own business. And so part of me was, I don't want to die and not have finished everything that I wanted to finish. And then I think the other part of that is really being of service to other people. I have a picture of my father with Colin Powell in '89. So my wife and I were at the time we were dating. I was in Germany. So he went to the Boy Scout Jamboree and he was there with Colin Powell. So in that picture, I'm about my father's age now. So if you ever see that picture and it looks like me, well, my father, we look a lot alike. I look like him. And so it's a special photo because it was a time that he went out, he met my wife, he met her parents. We were just kind of checking up to make sure, I hear my son talking about this woman. I never heard him talk about a woman so much. Let me see what's going on. And so, probably about a year and a half later, my wife and I ended up being married. So that was what, I guess 27 years ago. So, I think that that was really, really a huge influence in my life. I was involved in scouting. So there were, I was fortunate. I grew up south of Chicago. A lot of people had moved from the projects to Markham, was basically where I grew up. And so, you have some people that, don't have fathers in their lives. I was fortunate to have, a lot of men in my life, through church, ministers, trustees, my parents, scouting and things like that. And so I've been able to reflect over time, say those are things that had huge influences. Then, doing ROTC, basically, our TAC officer, he was no joke. I mean, he used to say, I've never blown off a class. And he used to drive you really, really hard. But when he says to you, when you go to camp, the only person that'll be getting in your way of doing well will be you, knowing that he had belief in me really, really helped me. So I think that those are just basically things that have helped me. I just have kind of gravitated towards helping other people. I'm basically paying it forward. I'm doing what other people have done for me, which has been to set me up for success.
Yes. Now, the central theme in your upbringing and your influences is consistency, it's hard work, it's attention to detail, both from your mom and cleaning and chores, and your father and his impact in the community and influence, and also just being a consistent presence where, as you mentioned, many of your peer group may not have had that same amount of support. And also with, let's say, ROTC, as well as the military and Army experience. So I have a theory that we, as far as you and as far as I and as far as the audience watching this, we are the best versions in terms of our entire bloodline culminating to this point. So my question for you is, knowing what you've been raised with and the different lessons you've been shared, how have you taken those lessons and more or less taken it to the next level? How do you look to reflect and make those who helped shape you proud of the man that you are today?
That's a good question. So I think about it. I guess I've dabbled around in trying to start a business probably for the last, I don't know, probably the last 10, 15 years. And then I look at it this way. So I'm 53. Yeah, I'm 53. So my father started his business and he was probably 63. So I'm 10 years earlier than my father. My daughter, who will be 24 in a couple of weeks, she got her first paycheck and she said, I need to do something to knock these taxes down. So one of the conversations I had with her last week was around a proposal around social media stuff that she's going to do for a potential client. But while this is not a means to an end for her, I don't think that's what she wants to do full time. She is embracing entrepreneurship along with what she wants to do. So I look at it that way and say, okay, each generation we do things a little faster. So I think it's that. And then I think I have an opportunity to, with social media and all the things that are available, maybe be able to do more than what my father did. I mean, my father would speak, he's active in the community. I have an opportunity to kind of take a message and share it, maybe even a broader sense, and be able to do more with that. So I think that's how all those things kind of play into that.
Yes, it's excellent to always be aware of the people and ideas that have shaped and ultimately created us. In many cases, we don't realize where those thoughts come from. But in my own personal story, my dad is my first public speaking coach and influence. And it took many years in life. It actually, when I spoke at Temple University and he came to see me, he pointed out some techniques that he does. Like, oh, you're trying to copy off the old man. So what I realized in kind of reverse engineering my speaking style is that 2 or 3 signature techniques or habits that I utilize actually came from watching him, and I didn't even realize it until years later. So we are often carbon copies of that which makes us. Now, transitioning into the world of careers and jobs, and my question is, or the reality is this, choosing the wrong career can be a hazardous decision in that we spend more time at work in our profession, whether we're entrepreneurs or whether we're full-time employees and professionals, than we actually do at home in many cases. So where you choose to work is of great importance. What is your advice for someone who is looking to make their way in the career world, and they're having the dilemma between passion and profit? Where do you fall within that, and how do you guide your clients to the right decision that would fit for them?
It's a difficult question, because I think that ultimately everybody has to put food on the table. It's really that simple. So I think a lot of it can depend on what your passion is. If you want to be a musician, be a musician. I think about the sacrifices and things that you're willing to make. So I always say there's a price for everything. So if you're willing to pay the price, go for it. I also say if it's something that you don't like, don't do it. If you absolutely hate it and you don't like doing finances, don't do finance work. So I think that, and I think sometimes it's just really hard to know what your passion is sometimes. Sometimes you just don't know. And so I think sometimes maybe you do both. Sometimes you get a job because you have to pay the bills, and then figure out, is my passion something that I can make a living doing? And if you're not sure, you can do that on the side. Do it on the side until it becomes bigger than basically your day job, and then quit your day job. So I think that the reality of it is everybody says that, hey, live your passion, do your passion. I can tell you when I was in my 20s, I knew what my passion was. I can tell you what I didn't know what to do. So I think that when people say that, I think the vast majority of people will tell you, I really don't know what my passion is. And we're a combination of all the things that we live in life. And so sometimes we stumble upon some things that we don't figure out until much later. I think the big thing is this. I think you have to just be willing to make some changes. If you get to a point where you say, you know what, I really don't like what I'm doing, then you're the only one that has control of your own life where you can make things different than they really, really are. And I think what happens oftentimes is people get stuck. It's interesting because, I was talking to somebody probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago. We were having kind of a strategy session. They were in this field that they had been in for the last 20 some years. Kids leaving home. They were contemplating whether or not they were going to stay what they were doing or do something else. And so, part of the conversation we had was basically around them spending some time writing down what they like to do, what they didn't like to do, or just thinking about 10 things they could do. Should I look for another company within my industry? And he had all types of excuses. And so his excuse that he gave me was that he flew a lot and he traveled a lot. I travel a lot, goes in cycles, but I've been, times when you're on a plane all the time. And as you know, you still have to kind of shut your phone down. You can't have Wi-Fi until the plane kind of takes off and you kind of go. Well, I said to him, so let me get this straight. So you don't have 10 minutes between the time that you get on the plane and sit down and jot some things down and the doors close. You don't actually have 10 minutes for yourself. So the reality of it is he's telling himself this story around his situation. And here's the interesting thing. The interesting thing is that his friend sent him to me basically to have a session because he felt like you need to have a conversation about what you want to do next. He wasn't really actually taking the next step. The reality of it is really what gets in people's way more than anything other than passion, doing what you don't like, doing what you do like, it's really fear. And it's not that I think fear is bad. I think fear can be a good thing. It's just you have to live with fear. You have to do some things that you're just uncomfortable with. You just do. Now, and some people will laugh at this. I've been trying to figure out this Instagram thing for like the last several weeks. I had a couple of conversations and everything. So I did my first Instagram post yesterday. I actually did a short video. It was stupid. I had to laugh, but it was really proud because I felt so stupid and silly. But it was what I needed to do because I actually figured, it's like, oh, that's how you do the hashtags. Oh, okay. All right. This is going well. Oh, this is cool. And so sometimes you just have to kind of put yourself out there. And just like, it's everything. You don't know what you don't know what you don't know. You got to live a little bit. And over time, you'll figure out your passion. Talk to people, a sense of it. You know what you like. You know what you like to do. And then figure out, could I do this on the side? Or couldn't I? It's just whatever you do, you just have to be willing to try a lot of different things.
Excellent point of view and perspective. Now, Keith, need you to put on your coach's hat because in this next scenario, you will help someone land the job. So there is someone who is watching this broadcast now. They have an interview this week. Maybe they have a scenario where they really need the job, but they don't want to show the desperation in that I need to get this job. can you take that viewer into the mindset of what is necessary to convey confidence, convey knowledge, skills, and ability, and land that job opportunity?
So I think a couple of things. I always go back to when I say, what's your story? We're all selling something. You got a story. Oftentimes when people come in interview, they're trying to please the interviewer. It's a two-way street. Sometimes when it's a no, because you actually didn't need to be there because I actually wasn't a good fit for you. And when you figure out what your story is or what your value proposition is, what are you selling, what's your brand, it'll go a long way in making sure that people see you who you are. So that would be the first thing. I think the second thing would be, do you understand what the job is, what the job description is, and then how does your story fit into what they're asking you to actually do? So that would be the second thing. And I think the third thing is if you go back and you look at that job description and what they're asking you to do, you have stories and things in your past that align to the things that they're asking you to do. So usually, especially around behavioral interview, the way for a company to see can you do the job or not is they want to see what your prior history is and what your prior successes are. So really think about your accomplishments relatively to that job and who you are and your brand. So when all of those pieces come together and you're able to basically tell that story, then you significantly increase your chances of getting the job. And if you don't, it may not be that you didn't interview well. It may be that you were not actually the right fit for the organization.
Ladies and gentlemen, especially that individual who had the interview coming up, you have just landed the position. Congratulations to you. Now, in terms of reputation management and careers, this is a very important topic in today's digital society, in that social media and, let's say, recruiters and how they are conditioned to, let's say, do Google searches through social media profiles and blog posts and to find out more about the overall personality. What are your thoughts or tips or strategies in terms of what candidates can do to safeguard or even augment their chances of success in terms of the extracurricular that many people have thought, well, that has nothing to do, that's my personal life. What does that have to do with my wanting this position?
So there are a couple of things there, Shadeed, that you kind of mentioned. So I think number one, you need to be on LinkedIn, at least if you're in a corporate setting, Fortune 500 companies or even smaller companies, you have to be on LinkedIn. You know, I had some candidates that I was conducting interviews for, and basically I went out to LinkedIn and they weren't on LinkedIn. You have CEOs, vice presidents, everybody and their uncle on LinkedIn, and not there. So in my mind, you're not even really a player if you're not on LinkedIn. And so there are a variety of reasons, stories that people had around. They were afraid their boss and this and that. And it's like social currency. Just to be in the game, you have to be there. And the reality of it is, if you're not LinkedIn, you're working probably 2 to 3 times as hard as the other person. So that's number one. And if I can't find you, then I'm suspect about who you are and what you bring to the table. Number two, let's say you have Facebook and you don't have LinkedIn, and some of the stuff that you think that should be probably that you have on Facebook, you're volunteering for, Art Walk, Cancer Walk, that should be on your LinkedIn, because for what you do, that aligns with that. And then I think the other part is that you just have to be smart. If you have on your, I know everybody likes to have a good time, but just you just can't have things like you're showing up drunk, all the stupid stuff that people do. What I'm looking for is who you are, the good, the bad, the ugly. And if it's really, really ugly, then I probably don't want to hire you. So I'm not expecting people to be saints, but I'm expecting people to basically be smart. And the reality of it is that there's so many different sites and so much more information now You just, unfortunately, because everybody is young and we all have done stupid things, just in today's world, it's more recordable. We see more of it. So I definitely do Google search to see what you're, and it's not really to see what you're doing badly. It's just to see who you are. Are you fit into the organization? Do your values align? What do you stand for? So things like blogs and things like that will probably come up. You know, are you active? What do you do? What do you do in your spare time? So I think you have to have a presence, but I think you have to be smart about it.
Yes, excellent insights. And to add on from a tech perspective, ladies and gentlemen, if you are an individual who, let's say, you enjoy the nightlife and you like to have a good time and you consider that an important or integral part of who you are as a person, you have to realize that people are always watching, and you have to also educate yourself on the privacy settings of the social media networks that you particularly choose to share your information. So you can set information or posts to only show up to friends and family, and have a public persona that is more professional and will be in alignment to a potential employer. And always keep in mind that when you're in the hiring phase or your resume is online, that's the time where you need to make sure that everything is clean and in alignment, and make sure that your personal life stays personal. And that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, Keith, in terms of your favorite book that has changed the way that you've seen the world, or how you perceived a specific fact or what you thought to be true of the world, what would that book be and why?
Geez. That's a hard question. I've read so many books. I mentioned Break All the Rules, and that was a book I read a while ago. So I definitely would say that would be one of them. And I think the title of the book speaks for itself. And it says Break All the Rules. I think part of it is what we know to be true, you know, is not necessarily true. I think, you know, I think the premise of the book is you basically focus on what you do well. I think the more that you can do that, the better off you're going to be. You know, earlier today, I was listening to Tim Ferriss and James Altucher. James Altucher was basically doing a podcast interview with Tim Ferriss. And at the end, you know, James talked about people basically focusing on what they did well. And it was interesting because here are two people that have done extremely well. And they talk a lot about their faults. They come up short. One of the things they basically said is there's about one or two things that everybody does extremely well. And the more time that you spend doing that, basically the better that you're going to be. I think that always resonates back to the whole strengths movement. You know, people oftentimes say, oh, you know, strength finders, you know, people need to focus on their weaknesses. Go back to World War II. If you go back to World War II, Patton was Patton. You know, basically Eisenhower is Eisenhower. The reason they did what they did as well as they did it, and they were in the roles, is because of what they brought to the table. I'm not sure Eisenhower could have done what Patton did with the drive and the pushing of the soldiers, just because they were different people, but they were the right men that were needed in the right position. No one accuses Steve Jobs of being a saint. The guy was a jerk. If you read his biography, you know that he was a very, very difficult person. But look at Apple today. The reason Apple is where it is today is because of Steve Jobs. Now, Steve figured out how to double down on some of the things that he did really, really well when he lost Apple and he was able to come back. And you look at Pixar and the results of that. It's him doubling down on what he did really, really well. So my guess is he used some of those strengths to kind of smooth out some of those rough edges that he had with working with people. But I think, so when I think back to Break All the Rules, and read a lot of other things, I begin to kind of see these patterns that the more that you can be who you are and really focus on what you do really, really well, you can really have some outstanding results.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have taken a trip down the influences, the inspirations, and the roots of what makes Keith a phenomenal coach and career professional today. I highly encourage that you get familiar with his work. And where can we find more information on your movement, your thought leadership, and your coaching services?
So you can find me on coach2achieve.com. That's my website. And primarily, and then you can always email me, c2a@coach2achieve.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to achieve, it is done through discipline, it is done through mentorship, and specifically, it is done through coaching. Greatness is not a solo sport, it is a team endeavor, and aligning yourself with the right coaching will achieve results. So on behalf of Keith Willis, Coach to Achieve, and myself, Shadeed Eleazer, this has been Conversational Currency, where we discuss the value and importance of social skills in a digital era. We thank you for tuning in.